Music in the Stalinist Soviet Union was nothing like we would imagine it being today. Neither was freedom of speech. What we would imagine today to be freedom of expression, with even politically charged art facing the least amount of regulation that it has ever had before in history, at least in the US. Back then and back there was the scrutiny of the Directorate of Cultural Affairs. Music was guaranteed and demanded by the government to be patriotic for the people and simplistic enough for the masses to understand. Glorious symphonies, military marches, waltzes were all composed first and foremost in the name of the Soviet Union, all while outside the concert halls. The Stalinist terror was responsible for the murder of more than 10 people to the power of 10 million. And raids by the NKVD rendered our composer, Shostakovich, Dmitri Shostakovich, under perpetual paranoia for most of his life, and later a world war ate through the Russian people. Shostakovich's struggle wasn't merely in expressing himself, as most artists today face. It was also surviving while doing so. It was not being detained and executed by the NKVD while doing so. A particular interest of Shostakovich's actually was the Jewish struggle. Anti-Semitism, brutal, blatant, legal anti-Semitism in the Soviet Union. One of the reasons why I'm here in the US today and not somewhere in Kiev or Kharkov, hashtag immigration, whatever. But the fact remains that Shostakovich, in order to survive and send a message and unite people, which is of course what music is all about, became master, more than anyone else at the time, of writing in between the lines, of using musical notes, the underscores, the structure of his music, to send a message under the radar. The full interpretation of his music, compared to what the music actually is, his intention, the border between his intention and the actual composition remains unclear. But what is clear, always, is that Shostakovich was and is the most influential 20th century composer. Arguably above Prokofiev, above Stravinsky, above Scriabin, above Bartok, whatever, because he used his music to solve a problem in the midst of a problem, rather than writing and applying his creative skills for the sake of creativity or for the sake of music. He was called the Red Beethoven, and he was actually so good at this that he was both loved and despised by the East and the West, by the Communist Party and the silent ones against. By the way, the Red Beethoven is not a name given lightly in the musical world whatsoever. The three fantastic dances, which I will be playing today, seem to make no sense at first glance, especially if you expect the names that you're hearing. The first is called a march, the second, a waltz, and the third, a playful polka. March, waltz, and polka. But if I didn't tell you that, and if you didn't know beforehand, you probably would have never guessed that those were the names of the pieces, because they sound completely different from the genre which they represent. There's a whole interesting discussion behind what the names of his pieces and the actual compositions represent, and I urge you to think about what I'm actually playing compared to what it's called. So remember, the first one is a march, even if it doesn't sound like one, and the second one is a waltz, even if it doesn't sound like one. That's because Shostakovich didn't have much at his disposal to express what he wanted to be expressed. And it's not a literary class, it's not the redness of the strawberry represented the fear and the horror in Hannah Katz's eyes. It's not the whatever. It's more about acknowledging the fact that music, and especially Shostakovich's music, every single aspect of it, from the name, from the notation, has a meaning, has a purpose, and it's up to us to decipher what that purpose is. This might be different for all of us. As usual, as typical in Shostakovich's music, he encapsulates what he's really trying to say in one of the pieces, the middle waltz. A ghostly, a cold, and a very, very beautiful piece, one of my favorites from the three, and one of my all-time favorites. And I know I say that about most of the pieces that I play. This time I actually mean it. So I urge you, when I play, to remember that music, and especially Shostakovich's music, is rarely about enjoying as much as it is about feeling and sympathizing. So try to imagine what this man, what this tormented soul, over 100 years ago was trying to tell us about his life and about the life of the people living in one of the most authoritarian states that has ever existed.